Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're stepping way back in time. We're heading to the year 1865 to explore the profound resilience and the very vivid daily rhythms of a pioneer household. Specifically, we're looking at Alexander and Eliza Sovereen. They lived in Middleton Township, right in Norfolk County, Ontario. We're going to unpack their incredible story, moving from their literal dawn to dusk labor to the deep, unshakable community bonds that held them together. And as you'll see, they were living in a world on the absolute brink of massive change. 14, that's a staggering number, isn't it? That is actually the number of children Eliza Sovereen gave birth to during her life. But, well, here is the really sobering reality of pioneer life that we have to establish right out of the gate. By 1865, only 9 of those children were still living. Alexander and Eliza had buried 5 of their little ones, Frederick, Rosella, Amard Ann, Rachel, and little Rosalia, in the local Delhi cemetery. This immense, compounded grief fundamentally shaped them. It forged this emotional resilience that, honestly, you and I might find hard to even fathom today. They knew firsthand exactly how fragile pioneer life was, and because of that, the children who survived were cherished beyond measure. So looking at the family in 1865, it was truly a hard-won stability. After 25 years of marriage, Alexander and Eliza had built a highly successful farm and a bustling household, despite all those early heartbreaks. Just look at the life in this home. We've got Gertrude at 14, likely finishing up her formal education and helping heavily at home. Sarah and Nancy, 12 and 10, are school-aged and rapidly learning necessary domestic skills. There's 8-year-old Valzoria, a surviving twin made perhaps even more precious by that earlier loss. Hattie is 6, spirited, and just starting school. And then the youngest boys, right? You've got 4-year-old Frederick doing minor errands like gathering eggs, and 2-year-old Addison, a toddler basically getting into everything. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it perfectly illustrates the pioneer life cycle. There was almost no teenage phase as we know it today. Nope. Children transitioned incredibly fast from simple childhood play to providing absolutely vital farm and household labor, all under the watchful eyes of their parents. Moving out to the fields, cultivating the land, was truly the engine of survival. This was Alexander's domain. At 50 years old, he possessed the seasoned expertise and the raw physical stamina to outwork men half his age. And man, that stamina was required because the rhythm of the farm was completely relentless, dictated entirely by the seasons. In the spring, Alexander was out there plowing fields with horse-drawn iron plows, which, by the way, was a nice upgrade from the crude tools of his youth. He's tapping maple trees for sugar and tending to newborn lambs. Then summer hits, bringing the brutal heat of haying and harvesting grain. Just imagine the physical toll of swinging a heavy wooden cradle scythe all day long under a blazing sun just to cut wheat. It's exhausting just thinking about it. By fall, the focus frantically shifted to picking apples, butchering livestock, and filling up the root cellar before that first frost hit. And winter? Well, it offered no real rest. It meant heading out into biting, freezing temperatures to chop ice for the animals and log the woodlot. It was literally a cyclical, dawn-to-dusk marathon of endurance. But here's the thing, the farm economy didn't run on just Alexander's labor in the fields. Let's compare the engines driving this whole operation. On one side, you have the men's work, cultivating fields, repairing miles of fences, hand-threshing grain with flails, and hauling heavy loads of produce to the market over in Delhi. On the other side, the women's work, managing a staggeringly complex domestic operation. We're talking everything from daily meal prep for a massive family, to preserving food, to physically clothing everyone. Both halves of this equation were monumental. They were equally vital operations that required immense physical endurance just to keep the family fed, clothed, and, well, alive. Which brings us to managing the domestic operation, or what we can definitely call Eliza's realm. At 45 years old, she spearheaded a domestic enterprise that was every bit as demanding as the outdoor agricultural work, doing it all right alongside her older daughters. Just look at her staggering daily load. She was rising before dawn just to build the fires, cooking 3 large meals daily over a hot iron stove, hauling and heating heavy buckets of water, hand-churning butter, making cheese, scrubbing and wringing out heavy, wet clothing by hand. And remember, without modern fabrics, that meant wrestling with soaking wet wool and heavy cotton. She sewed and mended every single garment the family wore, all while preserving root vegetables, smoking meats, and making jams. I know, it's almost exhausting just to hear. I really want you to feel the sheer volume of that physical labor. She did all of this manually, day in and day out, while simultaneously raising and managing a house absolutely full of active children. But, all that grueling work did actually yield remarkable rewards. The fruits of 25 years of labor meant that by 1865, they had achieved what were, for the time, real modern luxuries. They had upgraded from the dark, drafty log cabins of their pioneer youth to a solid frame house, or at least a very well-plastered log home. They enjoyed the steady heat of a cast-iron cook stove. They slept on soft feather mattresses made from years of saved goose down. And perhaps most amazingly, their evenings were now illuminated by the bright, clear glow of new kerosene lamps. That was a huge, modern leap forward from dim, smoky tallow candles. Okay, so it wasn't all just toil and sweat. Let's look at education and family fun, the life they built beyond the labor. The family placed profound importance on the future, specifically schooling, and this brilliantly illustrates a fascinating contrast, an educational divide right within the very same house. Thanks to the 1850 Common Schools Act, the Sovereen children had the incredible opportunity to attend the local one-room schoolhouse, where they learned reading, arithmetic, grammar, and geography. But on the other side of that coin, we have Alexander's regret. Despite being a highly successful farmer and a deeply respected community figure, Alexander was never taught to read or write as a boy. Imagine Alexander, a man of such great capability, watching his children learn to read by lamplight, completely unable to help them with their lessons, carrying the quiet regret of his own illiteracy. Yet, because of that, he made absolutely sure his kids attended school as regularly as farm demands allowed. When the work was finally done, the pioneer evening was filled with a really special kind of warmth. They found genuine joy and entertainment in simple, homemade activities. They read aloud from the Bible by that new kerosene lamplight, likely with Eliza, who could read, leading the way. The children played games like Cat's Cradle or imagined worlds with dolls made from scraps of fabric or corn husks. Alexander, who was known as quite the storyteller, would share vivid tales from his pioneer youth. And the seasons brought their own fun, right? You had winter sleigh rides and ice skating on frozen ponds, or summer afternoons spent wild berry picking. So, despite their immense physical exhaustion, their home was this welcoming place, filled with life and hospitality. Let's zoom out a bit to their faith and local community, which was really the glue that held them all together. The Sovereens didn't survive in isolation. Neighbors and faith were essential for actual, literal survival in Windham Township. For them, the Baptist Church was the undisputed center of their social world, and this wasn't merely a weekend obligation to check off a list. No, the church was the absolute emotional bedrock of the family. It was their place of Sunday worship, yes, but it was also the source of their deep community identity. It offered prayer meetings, sewing circles, and summer picnics, and most importantly, it provided profound comfort and support after the tragic loss of their 5 children. It bound them to their neighbors through times of joyous celebration and times of devastating grief alike. This deep communal bond extended directly into their cooperative labor. Let's move to and see how this builds into something like a threshing bee. Look at the anatomy of this event. Step 1, the traveling threshing machine arrives at the farm. Step 2, neighbors gather from all across the township to provide the essential manual labor required. Step 3, the men endure long, hard, incredibly dusty days of collective physical exertion, working the heavy machinery and hauling grain. And finally, Step 4, Eliza and the older girls serve an enormous multi-day feast to the exhausted workers. This cooperative labor, sharing the sweat, the choking dust, and the massive communal meals cemented their neighborly bonds. If a neighbor needed a barn raised or hay brought in before a storm, the community showed up. They simply couldn't succeed without each other. So bringing it all together into a legacy of resilience, let's put 1865 into a broader context. Let's zoom out to place the family within the macro-historical context of North America, because they were living in a world on the absolute brink of sweeping change. Contrasting the local farm reality with the global landscape, we see that on the farm, they're still deeply reliant on horse-drawn plows, hand tools, and cooperative barn raisings. They're moving to the steady, isolated, cyclical rhythm of the harvest seasons. But just beyond Windham Township, everything is transforming. Telegraph lines and the Great Western Railway are arriving, connecting rural towns to the wider world. The debates surrounding the 1867 Canadian Confederation are looming large. Down south, the U.S. Civil War has just ended, bringing sobering news of massive casualties and very real fears of Irish-American Fenian raids right across the border into Canada. Alexander would have caught up on all this news during his market trips to Delhi. It's just a fascinating juxtaposition, right? You have this quiet, steady, traditional agricultural life existing right alongside staggering technological and political revolutions. So the crucial point is this. The Sovereen family's story is a masterclass in survival, faith, and the true power of community, which leads us to our final thought for today's explainer. When you consider the unrelenting dawn-to-dusk labor and the deeply heartbreaking losses Alexander and Eliza endured while building their legacy, how does their 1865 pioneer resilience change the way you view your own modern daily comforts? It's definitely something to think about the next time you simply turn on a light switch or turn up the thermostat. Thank you so much for joining me as we explore this amazing piece of history. Keep learning,